Hi, everyone. I'm Rena 9, and BBC News is reporting President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, received a secret payment to arrange talks with Ukrainian government officials. The meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko reportedly took place at the White House last June. The Ukrainian president is calling the story, quote, a blatant lie. BBC News' Paul Wood has more on this exclusive story.
Donald Trump's run for the US presidency was watched with alarm by Ukraine's government, dismayed by his apparently pro-Russian rhetoric. Then Trump had a setback. His campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was forced to resign, accused of getting millions of dollars from Russian interests in Ukraine. The leak that brought Manafort down came from the very top of the Ukrainian government, according to sources here and outside Ukraine. If that's true, the Ukrainians badly miscalculated, backing the losing side in the US election.
So in early 2017, President Poroshenko was desperate to get talks with Donald Trump, but he was being offered little more than a White House photo op. According to a senior official here who has direct knowledge of what happened, Poroshenko instructed two close associates to open a back channel. That back channel, our source says, was President Trump's personal lawyer and trusted fixer, Michael Cohen.
The senior official says Cohen was paid $400,000. A second source says it was more. There's no suggestion that Trump knew of this. We're told that Cohen got help from Felix Sater, a convicted former mobster once in business with Trump. Cohen is under investigation for paying hush money to a porn actress, Stormy Daniels, on Trump's behalf. Her lawyer says Cohen's bank records show he took money from US companies for access to the president.
Well, I think it's pretty obvious at this point that Michael Cohen took substantial sums of money and was selling access to the highest office in the land, namely to the U.S. president. We have every reason to believe that there are additional payments that have not been reported yet from those with Ukrainian interests.
Thank you.
Poroshenko couldn't hide his delight at meeting Trump and before Russia's Vladimir Putin. How many minutes he'd get was still being negotiated as he flew from Kiev. But this was more than just a photo op. And after Poroshenko went home, Ukraine's inquiry into Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, was steadily wound down. There was never a direct order to stop the Manafort inquiry, the special prosecutor in Kiev tells me. But, he says, from the way the investigation progressed, it was clear that our superiors were trying to create obstacles. Did President Trump's lawyer ask the Ukrainians to stall their inquiry? Perhaps he didn't need to. Poroshenko knew that to do otherwise, said one source, would be like spitting in Trump's face. The US is continuing its own investigation into Paul Manafort and Russian influence in the American election, but without help from Ukraine.
Paul Wood joins me now from Washington. Paul, this isn't the first time Michael Cohen's been accused of taking money in order to arrange access to President Trump. What's different, though, about this particular case?
Well, this is allegedly foreign money. There were claims that he took money from US companies. Those were brought out by Michael Avenatti, who managed to see, he said, the so-called suspicious activity reports sent by Cohen's bank to the US Treasury. Now we're hearing from sources in Kiev, with some support from Mr. Avenatti, who recalls payments of this kind, although he doesn't have documentation, that the Ukrainian government did this. This was allegedly a back channel. This is what sources are telling us. It was $400,000 to $600,000. Have to say, Mr. Cohen denies this. The two associates of Mr. Poroshenko, who are described as operating the back channel, they deny it. And the Ukrainian president's office, after initially saying it wouldn't engage with this story, has now issued a fairly robust statement saying this is fake news, this is a blatant lie designed to destabilise relations between the United States and Ukraine. Having said all that, our sources are sticking to their story, and it is quite interesting to look at how Ukrainian-American relations have changed. Last month, for instance, the United States decided to sell 210 Javelin anti-tank missiles to Ukraine, something that was never done under President Obama, for instance. And our sources, both inside Ukraine and a source we have in a Western intelligence community, says that this is all part of what they call a non-aggression pact between the Trump administration and the Ukrainian government. If not explicitly agreed, then certainly understood as that by the Ukrainians.
Paul, is there any suggestion that any part of this payment to Cohen made its way to President Trump?
Our sources aren't saying that. They say they don't think Mr. Trump was necessarily aware of this arrangement, certainly didn't benefit from it. And they're not saying either that he explicitly asked Mr. Poroshenko not to impede, wind down the Ukrainians' own investigation into Paul Manafort. This, our Ukrainian sources say, is something Mr. Poroshenko realised he had to do all on his own. If you think back to the general election campaign, there was a moment when Paul Manafort, who was Mr. Trump's campaign manager, had to resign because of leaks out of Ukraine, which alleged that he received millions of dollars from a pro-Russian party there, the Party of the Regions. Now, our sources in Ukraine say that leak was authorised by Mr. Poroshenko on the assumption that Hillary Clinton would win. Of course, that assumption was wrong, and Mr. Poroshenko had to build bridges and fast.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You know, President Trump's critics often say that he's accused of being too friendly to Russia. So what exactly is he doing helping Ukraine?
Well, this is about influence peddling. It's an allegation from our sources about influence peddling in the White House. And it may be that the Ukrainians, if this payment was made, didn't get their money's worth. They complained to us that on the morning that Mr. Poroshenko was to head into the Oval Office, he was still unsure about how much time he would actually get. And the Ukrainians felt, in their words, that Mr. Cohen had promised something that he couldn't deliver.
Paul Wood in Washington. Paul, grateful for your reporting. Thank you for joining us.